The moment Earth's battleship emerged, every fleet fell silent. Drail's hands were flat on the edge of his console. He had been aware of this for some time. 42 officers on the command deck, and not one of them had spoken in the last 2 minutes. The feed from his Second Fleet's command ship, which carried background chatter at all times, system updates, officer acknowledgements, the ordinary noise of a working fleet, had gone silent 90 seconds ago. On the tactical display, ISV render had not moved. It had not repositioned. It had not changed vector. It had absorbed a full cruiser barrage 11 minutes ago, and the hull integrity report had come back in under 3 seconds. He had read that report 4 times. It said one word, nominal. His weapons array readout showed renders targeting systems live, fleet-wide, pointed at every ship in his formation. Not firing, just there and pointed, and waiting for a decision he had not yet made. 3 ships had withdrawn to FTL distance without his order, then 7, then 14. He reached for his command panel. 31 years of silence, and they were about to find out what it was for. Stay with me. The session that started it happened 31 years earlier, in a chamber built in the shape of a closed fist. The Karath assembly hall rotated slowly above neutral space, 3.1 kilometers across, its outer ring designed to make every delegation feel the weight of approaching it. The human section was in the back quadrant, near the ventilation arrays, with a small podium and no floor lighting. Floor lighting was reserved for Tier 1 delegations. Tesov Aaron had spent 11 years not caring about the floor lighting. He had spoken on that floor 214 times. Trade disputes. Border classification hearings. 3 requests for developmental reclassification that the Dominion had tabled without a vote. He knew the chamber the way you know a room where you've never quite been welcome, every exit, every angle, every face that would look away when things got difficult. Grand Executor Salm read the colonial directive in full, 12 pages. His throat markings pulsed in a slow, authoritative rhythm as he read, a deep slate-gray pattern that brightened at the end of each clause, the way a speaker's voice might rise. The directive's language was careful and polite. It spoke of galactic stability. It spoke of developmental oversight. What it meant, stripped down, was this: surrender Ferath Station and 4 colonial settlements within 4 days, or the Dominion fleet would handle the transfer. Salm did not look at the human section while he read. Tesov stood when Salm finished. He pressed his thumb once against his wrist bone, a habit, his only tell, and walked to the floor without notes. He had not carried notes into a chamber in 11 years. He said 4 sentences. Humanity had heard the declaration. Humanity would not comply. Earth's position was final. He walked back to his seat. The laugh started in the Karathi section. It spread. Not cruel, genuinely confused, the way a room reacts when something happens that nobody planned for. A Tier 3 developing species with 11 colonies and no rated combat fleet had refused the Dominion. The item was logged. The fleet orders had been drafted 3 weeks ago. Nobody looked at Tesov again. The session moved on. And in the Dunhello belt, 3 light minutes past the outer marker of the SAL system, a 2-word transmission was already moving toward a rock that had been keeping a secret for 31 years. The belt had been chosen because it had nothing worth watching. No shipping lanes ran through the Dunhello. No Dominion sensor posts pointed at it. The asteroid DH-190 was large enough to matter and unremarkable enough to ignore, a dark rock, 190 kilometers across, rotating slowly in a region of space that nobody had ever needed to cross. The construction cavity inside it had been hollowed over 6 years, sealed under a false geological survey for the 25 years after that. The air inside never warmed above 4 degrees. It smelled of recycled filters and metal and the particular stillness of a place that had been closed a long time. Mael Dren had been inside it for 21 years. He was 62 years old, engineer prime, and he had built the reactor core over 14 of those years. He had explained its design to 3 oversight panels, twice to admirals who needed plain language, once to a government committee that had nearly cancelled the program when the cost projections revised upward for the 2nd time. He had a habit of pressing his left palm flat against warm metal when he wanted to hear what it was doing. When the two-word transmission reached the rock and the activation sequence ran, Dren walked to the reactor room and put his hand on the primary casing. The sound came up through the floor before it reached his ears. A low resonance in the chest, something felt first, heard second, the kind of frequency that a body recognizes before the brain does. He stood there for a long time. Before he left the room, he stopped at the hull plate. It was bolted near the reactor access door, the first exterior plate ever welded to the ship's frame 31 years ago in a ceremony that 6 people attended. The construction team had kept the 3 score marks from the original cutting tool, never ground them smooth. Dren pressed his palm against the plate, felt the marks under his fingers, and thought that most of the people who had built this ship would never stand where he was standing. ISV Render moved toward the exit corridor for the first time. The passage had been carved exactly wide enough, with 40 meters of clearance on each side. Dren watched through the viewport near the engine section as the rock walls moved past, close enough that he could read the blast marks from the excavation work. He had been there for that work too. The forward hull cleared the asteroid face. Stars appeared. He watched the rest of the ship emerge into open space and understood, for the first time, that he had never actually seen it whole. On the command deck, Captain Savkaras did not watch the departure through a viewport. He watched through sensor feeds and position data, surrounded by a crew that had been waiting between 3 and 9 years, depending on their assignment date. He had written 3 versions of his address to them and deleted all 3. He spoke without notes. He said the ship was ready, the crew was ready, their job was simple: arrive, stand, hold. He closed the channel. Ferath Station's alert went out at local dawn. The colony's 19,000 residents came outside to look. The Dominion formation spread across the upper atmosphere from horizon to horizon in the early light, and from the ground, it looked almost beautiful, the way something very large and very wrong looks before the understanding catches up to the sight. Colony Defense Commander Breck Sola read the hold order for the 4th time. Hold position. Do not engage. Help is coming. He had followed orders for 20 years in Earth's defense service. He called his crews to standby, not launch standby, and stood at the window of the command post and watched the formation and worked at trusting the people above him. Fleet Warden Goss Drail had done this 11 times. His formation assumed standard annexation configuration above Ferath, spread pattern, atmospheric coverage, response vectors open in all directions. He opened the colony channel and delivered the prepared address. His secondary mandibles clicked twice before he began, the involuntary tell his officers had learned to watch, the sound he made when he was running calculations. He mentioned stability. He mentioned the deadline. He did not mention what would happen if the colony failed to respond. He closed the channel and waited. The Dunhello Belt had been flagged 9 times by Dominion intelligence as a zone of anomalous energy output. 9 times the report had been marked low priority, a developing species running unusual tests. The analysts had been almost completely right. No answer came from Ferath Station. On the Sherry observation lens in geostationary orbit above the transit corridor, Kale Mand had been broadcasting for 6 hours. Her data analyst, Preth Sava, was watching the long-range array when the reading came in, a mass signature that made the array recalibrate. He checked it twice. Sensor interference did not hold a steady heading through a gravity gradient. Sensor interference did not have a consistent velocity. He told Kale. She looked at the numbers and turned the camera toward the outer system and held it there without speaking. ISV Render dropped out of FTL at the system's edge. Every proximity alarm on every Dominion ship triggered in the same second. The sound of 400 automated systems reaching the same conclusion simultaneously, and then nothing. No officer called out a position. No weapons team requested firing clearance. The crews of 400 ships looked at their sensors and experienced the gap between receiving information and being unable to process it. Drail's tactical officer tried a size estimate. She read it, Read it again, said nothing. Drail queried the vessel database. No match. Broader parameters. No match. He switched to the theoretical design archive, every warship concept ever formally proposed by any spacefaring species across recorded history. The system had been designed to return a closest match estimate when no exact classification existed. It did not return one. It returned analysis not applicable. He had never seen that response. A channel opened, human voice, female, calm, no aggression, no ceremony, no codes, 11 words, sent on every frequency simultaneously, reaching every ship and relay station in range. ISV render, Earth Defense Fleet, Farath Station is not available. The channel closed. Drail's secondary fleet commander asked if he should begin targeting calculations. Drail did not answer. He was looking at the mass reading and running the number again. Junior Enforcement Commander Veth Orak had served 9 years in the Dominion Fleet. He had been in 2 enforcement operations. He was the kind of officer who made decisions quickly in order to feel that a situation was still moving. He opened fire. Full primary barrage from the Karath cruiser immovable, every weapon system it carried, directed at ISV Render's forward section. On Render's command deck, Sav Karas watched the energy bloom on the external cameras. He did not give an order. The hull impact registered internally as a vibration, the kind a heavy pressure door makes when it seals. Hull integrity came back in under 3 seconds. It said, nominal. Weapons Chief Dolly's Kern ran one finger along the edge of her station, one slow beat. Then she ran the power-up sequence, full targeting array, fleet-wide engagement configuration, every system live. She did not open a firing solution. She ran the power-up and let the Dominion sensors read it. The energy signature that crossed every ship in the system was not a shot. It was a statement in a language that needed no translation about the full capacity of a vessel that had just absorbed a complete cruiser barrage and registered it as a vibration, and had chosen, so far, not to use what it was carrying. On 17 Dominion ships, automated threat response protocols triggered without human input. 2 ships began plotting FTL exit vectors before their captains gave any order. Aboard the immovable, Orak opened a channel to Fleet Warden Drail. He said, in a voice that was working to stay level, that he believed he had misread the situation. He broadcast his surrender code on an open channel. He sat down. Drail's hands were still flat on the edge of his console. He understood now what he had not understood when the script began, that the ships leaving his formation were not panicking, were not disobeying. They were completing a logical process, the same process he had been running for the last 11 minutes without putting it into words. No match, no closest estimate, no category. The weapons array from ISV Render had not changed in position or power level, still live, still pointed, still not firing. He had 400 ships, fewer now, and a council directive and full operational authority, and no order he could give that would change what his sensors were returning. He reached for his command panel. Not to fire. Kale Mand had been on air for 11 hours without interruption. She watched the surrender broadcast from Orak's cruiser move across every open channel in the system. She spoke for the first time in 40 minutes. I want to be precise about the sequence, because the sequence is what matters. ISV Render was struck by a full fleet barrage. It did not fire back. It powered its weapons array and held. The ship that fired has surrendered. Sections of the fleet are withdrawing without orders. ISV Render has not discharged a single weapon. Breck Sola stepped outside the command post into afternoon light. His comms officer had played the Render transmission through the external speaker. Sola stood there a moment, said to nobody in particular, "We can stop watching the sky." Grand Executor Saln watched the sensor feed from Farath for 7 minutes without moving. His chief of staff entered and stood near the door. Saln said he needed time. His chief of staff said Drail was waiting for updated orders. Saln said he was aware. He was still looking at the size comparison his analysts had added to the display, the Dominion's largest warship set beside the sensor outline of ISV render. He had been looking at it for 4 minutes. Drayle sent the fleet withdrawal order without requesting authorization from the assembly. Some decisions, he had learned today, could not wait for someone else to catch up to them. As the fleet began to move, his navigation officer flagged something. ISV render had opened a short-range channel to the Karath flagship. Not words. A standard navigational clearance code, a courtesy signal confirming the fleet's departure vector and acknowledging open passage. She said quietly that the humans were giving them a lane home. Drayle approved the departure heading. He did not look at the render feed again. He was writing a message to his own records office, not an after-action report, a resignation not out of shame. He was too old for shame to arrive first. He was writing it because he understood, sitting here with the clearance code on one screen and the tactical display on the other, that the version of the galaxy his career had been built on had quietly become a previous version. The emergency session of the Karath Assembly was the fastest convened in 280 years of recorded history. Saln moved through the procedural steps with the controlled expression of someone who understood that the least dignified option remaining was still better than the alternative. The vote to revoke the colonial restrictions passed. The Orlando delegation voted in favor. One of their senior delegates, an elderly woman who had served 22 years in the chamber, stayed in her seat long after the final count, looking at nothing in particular, with an expression that was not quite a smile, but was the closest her face could arrange. ISV render was already heading back toward the belt. Mail Dren went to the hull plate. The reactor was running at cruise output, now quieter, the difference between something pushing against its limits and something doing what it was built to do. He pressed his palm against the plate one last time. 3 score marks, unchanged. 31 years of history in a short scar in cold alloy. He thought that some things were built to be invisible right up until the moment nothing else mattered. On 400 Dominion ships, captains sat down to write their reports. Every report said the same thing in a different way. They had encountered something they could not classify, and they had made the only rational decision the data supported. None of them used the word afraid. None of them had to. The word that fit was older than afraid, and harder to put in an official record. The word for standing in front of something so far outside your frame of reference that your training stops running, and understanding, in that stillness, that the galaxy is larger than it was this morning.